Good day, everyone, and welcome to Different Stages Radio. I'm your host, JJ, broadcasting in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And my guest today is a phenomenal guitarist, vocalist, you know from such bands as Bon Jovi, Triumph, and Frozen Ghost. But you should really get to know him from Phil X and the Drills, who are about to release their brand new album, Pow, Right in the Kisser, on March 28th on Frontiers Music. Please welcome my guest, Phil X. How are you? Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm awesome, dude. How you doing?
Pleasure to see you. Pleasure to talk to you. Big album coming out March 28th. 3 singles so far. Lots going on in Phil X world.
Dude, it's pretty exciting. We're getting it's being with Frontiers has changed our game big time because they set this stuff up. I've done virtual radio tours, which is like 10 minutes with like 8 stations in a couple of hours kind of thing. And it's changing the game for us. It's finally something that I look forward to when they go, hey, check it out. If you could tag this because you're on the Breaking Rock Apple Music thing right now, and I'm like, whoa, okay, that never happened before. So it's pretty exciting.
So Frontiers is definitely a good place to be.
Mhm.
3 singles coming in. First single, Don't Wake Up the Dead, and then Moving to California. Fake the Day Away is just crushing. Great,
Oh
great.
yeah,
Um,
thanks.
but to jump ahead after hearing the record, which I think is great, one big standout for me was Heal.
Yeah,
Can you talk about that track at all?
yeah. So it's funny. We were living in Vegas at the time because I've moved, I don't know, 5 times in the last 8 years and never want to move again. But we were in Vegas for 2 years, and I really wanted to do something special for my wife's birthday. Like, it's one of those things. Like, what do I get her? She's got everything. She doesn't need another pair of shoes. Um, you know,
You
and I
don't,
can't
you
buy
don't
her.
tell a woman they don't need another pair of shoes.
I can't buy her a vacuum for her birthday. Like, no, that's bad taste. So, anyways, I wrote her a song. I wrote her Heal. So I wrote it, and there was no intention on putting it on any record, but it came out so great. Being in Vegas at the time was amazing because we went to Kevin Trico's studio, and Brent Fitz is in Vegas as well. Me and him, we tracked the drums at Kevin Trico's studio, and then I did some guitars, and then got home and did some overdubs, and man, I sang it, and then she had a bunch of people over for her birthday, and I'm like, I need you to come to the car for a minute. She's like, what are you talking about? I need you to come to the car for a minute. She goes, okay. So we go sit here. I'll sit here. I put the song on in the car so she could hear it, just her. And she's like, what is this? I go, this is your birthday present. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, what? I go, I wrote the song for you. It's for you. And I know you can't make out the lyrics because I mumble a lot, so I'll write them out for you. But it came out great. But I'm glad you dig the tune, man. I'll tell my wife.
Yeah, no. Well, there you go. And I appreciate the story. That just makes the song even better than it already was. That's great. So now this album has been in the works for quite some time. I was reading about how the You Sunk My Battleship, that
Yeah,
goes back to 2014. So
yeah.
it's just been something you've been plugging at, and it finally.
It's a great question because yeah, Stupid Good Lookings Volume 1 came out in 2019. That was the first installment. And then it was going to be, at first it was going to be one record of 10 or 12 drummers or something. And then I thought, well, I got to put something out, and not all of it's done. So we put out 6. And then this one just kept going. I kept writing. So the first song we recorded on this record was You Sunk My Battleship with Brian Tishy in Hollywood at Grandmaster Studios. And then the last song we recorded was with Tosh Peterson last November. And the rest of the record was done, but I had written the song, and I go, I got to put the song on the record. It was seemed like a good idea. And then I called East West Studios. I called Ross Hogarth, my buddy engineer. I called Tosh. Everybody's available this one day, so we all cram into the studio. He lays down the drums. I go home. I replace all the guitars, get Dan to play the bass because Tosh has a feel, and I wanted us to be all in sync. And sang that and mixed it, put it on the record. So it was literally recorded over a 10-year period. And some of this, I was very active, even though I was touring with Bon Jovi in 2018, we were very active on this record as well, because we played T-Mobile Center in Vegas, and that's where Tico recorded his song, Find a Way. And and me, we're on the road, right? So I had, hey buddy, I know you like golfing on days off, but if I can get my hands on a studio, will you come in and track a tune? And he's like, I do anything for you. And I'm like, awesome. So we did that. And then when we were in New York playing 2 sold out nights at Madison Square Garden, I hired the power station and got Liberty to come in and record Broken Arrow. So I mean, it's one of those things, man. We just kept plugging away. I kept writing. Broken Arrow I wrote after Chris Cornell passed, because I you never know what's going on in somebody's brain. So that was one of those moments where I just sit back, and I would have never written about a topic like suicide years ago. But as you grow older, and want to add more dimension to your art, it was a good time for that.
That's amazing. Now, looking at all the different drummers, you have terrible, terrible drummers on this album. They're just, I don't know.
Terrible. They all
I don't know what you were thinking. You just clearly weren't thinking. Some guy named Tommy Lee, who's on that new single Fade the Day Away, he's okay. Ray Luzier's on there. Brent Fitz, of course, who's a part of the actual band. Tico, as you mentioned. And then you already mentioned Liberty, who I was going to bring up, who I thought was a really nice touch to have on the album, Liberty DeVito. That's awesome.
He's amazing.
However, when I doing some digging and seeing that you played on a Stewart Copeland album years ago, I'm wondering, was Stewart just not good enough to get on your album? Does
so
he
when we
have the chops?
through the process,
yeah,
there's drummers. Obviously, I called Stewart.
Yeah.
I went to his studio. He said, hey, come by. So I went to his studio, and we were hanging out, and he was showing me his studio, and he's got this corner of all this percussion you've never seen before in your life. And he goes, and check it out. He grabs sticks and starts playing this groove. And I'm like, that's amazing. Like, I go, hey, so I told him what I was doing. And he goes, well, I have to tell you two things. I'm like, what? He goes, my memory sucks. I'll never make it through a song. And I'm like, what? Can you make it through half and then punch in the other half? Probably not. And I'm like, okay. I mean, if that's your initial feel for it, then you don't have to do it. But what if I sent you a track and you can play some percussion on it? And he goes, hey, I would do that. But it never happened. We could never get our schedules together. And I mean, when you're talking about recording a record over 10 years, you got to remember there was a bunch of Bon Jovi touring. There was a bunch of Bon Jovi recording. There was a bunch of interruptions. So, and that's what happens, and life happens, and I became a dad for the second time. And daddy duty calls and stuff like that. But the amazing thing is when you have kids, your writing kind of changes a little bit. You're writing more for, I have always been interpretive. I love lyrics to be interpretive. And I say this all the time. If somebody walks up to me and asks me what I thought of what I was thinking when I wrote a lyric, I say, what do you think I was thinking? And then they always come up, not always, but in a lot of cases come up with something that's way different and even cooler than what I was thinking. So that's why I've stuck to that lane of being interpretive with my lyrics. But like I said, man, when I had kids, everything kind of changed musically. I feel like, you kind of grow up and away from just writing about evil ex-girlfriends and stuff, I mean, Evil Robot is our bonus track for Japan. And I wrote that song, I can't even remember when, like 2005 or something. Mm.
Sitting in the vault, ready for action.
Yeah, man. Ready for action.
So now you talk about writing stuff for now that you have kids and having that mindset. If we can go back to when perhaps you were a bit of a kid, we talked about it briefly off air. A lot of people might not know the Frozen Ghost era. That was my introduction to you. For those who don't know about Frozen Ghost in the late 80s, how did that happen? Because there was already a record under their belt before you had joined
Yeah.
Honey and Wolf. How'd that
They
happen?
had, they had a number 5 hit with Should I See? And then so a guy, Mark Chappell, who was doing sound for my cover band, and all these dives within a 500-kilometer radius where we're doing 3 45-minute sets 3 nights a week. He would be doing sound for us. And then he got a really cool gig doing monitors for Frozen Ghost. So I remember he goes, "Hey man, I'm in town. I don't have wheels. I have to meet the bus at a mall." It was a mall parking lot. Like everybody was meeting at a mall in Toronto parking lot. And he goes, "Can you give me a lift to the bus?" And I'm like, "Yeah, of course." So we got in the car. I drove him to the bus. And I remember seeing the video and the song. It's an amazing song. Should I See? Was so many great songs on that record. And then he got to know Arnold Lanny, the songwriter, singer, producer, keyboard player. He got to know him really well, and he said, "You got to see this kid play guitar." And so before I knew it, Arnold Lanny came to the Gasworks upstairs to see my band, and I saw him walk in. I'm like, "Hey, it's the guy from the video." I saw him walk in, watch a couple of songs, and leave. And I thought, "Oh, okay." I didn't want to read into it too deeply, but he got my number from Mark and called me the next day, and he said, "Hey, I saw you play last night. I'm completely blown away. I'm recording a song on Friday. Do you want to come to the studio and play some guitar?" And that's how it all started. And then that was a nice place to visit. That was the record that I played the guitar on and toured with the band. Exactly. And then while I was recording a lot of Shake Your Spirit, did all the rhythm guitars, and then I was halfway through the solos. They had to get somebody else because I got the call to go tour with Aldo Nova. And I sat down with Arn. I think I broke his heart. I mean, we speak every month, even today. So
that's brilliant.
He got over it. But I said, "Hey man, I really want to do this, and I've never toured the States. I mean, I've been with you guys, and we've gone across Canada many times, but I've never toured the States. And this starts in a few weeks. And I really want to do it." And he said, "Well, you're the first guy I wanted to be in the band besides me and Wolf. And now you're going." So he didn't say F you, but I felt like it was coming.
Yeah, that's tough.
And then he said, and I go, "Well, I'll survive, man. Don't worry about it. Go do what you need to do. I'll survive." And then right before I left, he said, "Can you come by the studio?" And I thought he was going to give me a beating or something, but he gave me a Discman. This is for those lonely nights on the bus. I'm like, "Dude, you're class. You're all class." It was amazing. I bet he doesn't even remember that.
I'm getting that's.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And then all this stuff started to happen at the same time. Triumph called me before that Aldo Nova tour and said, "Hey, so everybody's talking about you when we talk about needing a new guitar player." And I'm like, "Oh, that's sweet." I tell you what, though, I'm committed to this bunch of touring for the next 6 months. I was on that. Look at you, you're prepared.
I'm trying to be.
So I said, I'm committed to this tour for the next 6 months. If you don't find anybody, maybe we can talk when I get back. And that's exactly what happened. So everything happens for a reason, you know?
No doubt. So the Triumph thing, the call for that happened just before the Aldo Nova tour.
Yeah.
Crazy. Now,
yeah.
Quickly on the topic of the Triumph, because I know we're a bit tight on time, but I just wanted to ask, do you feel in retrospect that maybe that was cut short a bit early, or was that just how it was perhaps laid out to be? Just that kind of.
You know what? It's one of those,
but yeah,
it's one of those situations where the business turned into the business.
Yeah.
And reared its ugly head. So they had a deal. Triumph had a deal with Victory Records, I believe it was. And you got Triumph, you got Victory, success.
Mhm.
You would think, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But they got into a battle when it got released and something happened. You guys said you were going to do this and you're not doing this. And then they're like, well, you agreed to this and da 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 da. And it became,
Yeah. It's done.
I mean, I think they pulled the record off the shelf. And so it's funny when people come up to me and go, man, I have that Jib Excess. I love that record. It's not uncommon for me to be out somewhere signing autographs at the NAMM show or sitting at a panel or something like that. And somebody puts the Triumph record in my face. So some people got it. And some people love it. They go, I love that record. And I did a lot of the guitars. I redid all the rhythms that were re-recorded, that were recorded prior. And then I actually co-wrote a few songs. And then I did a lot of the soloing, but some of the solos were already recorded when they were still looking for a guitar player. Mm-hmm. And that was Lawrence Fulcomer, but up in Toronto. I mean, we only did 11 shows, and it was a learning experience. You know, that was the first time, you know, I'd lay down a solo and Mike would walk into the studio and go, man, that's a great solo, but it really doesn't sound like Triumph. And that was, the light bulb went over my head saying, hey, maybe when you're doing other people's stuff, you got to dial it back a little bit. Which came in handy with Bon Jovi, I'll tell you that.
No doubt. So maybe we can do some quick running around. So we have this new album, of course, well, the most recent.
Yes.
And then there's the duets version coming?
Yes.
I was seeing something about, now is it re-recorded, the album? Like, did you track it again, or is it just
I don't know if I'm supposed to say.
Okay.
Because it might be too early. I want to say there's a couple of duets on it.
Okay.
And maybe even a couple of new songs.
Oh.
But let's scratch that. I don't have any idea what's going on.
Oh, here we go. You don't want to be doing time now, do you?
What? What's happening?
What? What are you talking about?
What?
So maybe we can bridge the gap here, because the Bon Jovi, Aldo Nova, you toured with him, the connection that he had with John Bon. Is that how that started to line up? And or I know I'm trying to cram in a bunch of stuff now, because you were doing a ton of session work.
Yeah.
In the 2000s, late 90s.
I don't think I think how it went, because I kept in contact with Tony Bon Jovi because he was our road manager for Aldo Nova.
Right.
And you know, so I think John Shanks said, John Bon Jovi called John Shanks and said, I need a guy just in case on the sidelines, on hold, to show up and be on the Bon Jovi stage if we need him. And Shanks said, I've been watching this guy on YouTube. You got to get him. And he can play and sing anything. He's funny. He looks like a good hang. And then, so, you know, John heard my name, and I don't think it rung a bell yet. And he called Howard Benson, who I worked with a lot on other people's records. And he said, what's this Phil X guy like? He's like, man, he delivers everything you need on guitar. And he's a great hang, and he looks rock and roll. Everything's good. And then but I think maybe in the back of his head, there was a tickle saying, I've heard that name before. So he probably called Tony or Matt and said, why do I know this name, Phil X? And they probably said, he was in Aldo's band in 1991, you know, that kind of thing. You played with him on stage. Because John did join us on stage for like a couple of songs, a couple of shows where he would co-sing Blood on the Bricks with Aldo, which was the single. And then we'd also learn Blaze of Glory, which was his single. Mm-hmm. So we did those two songs. So I think when he called me, he was like, hey, man, so it's been 20 years, but holy shit, you're the session guy in LA now. I'm like, yeah, pretty much. And then he goes, hey, man, so it's really easy. You know, you just learn 2.5-hour show. And if I call you, you know, you'll have a good sound check to get it all dialed in, and we'll do the show that night. I'm like, oh, what? That sounds like a piece of cake to you?
Oh, no problem.
But it kind of happened that way. So it was, I made sure I was prepared. Otherwise, I would have got sent home. It would have been like, okay, well, that didn't work.
No, we don't want that. But what we do want to talk about too quickly before we go is the show that you did there a couple of weeks ago, or was it last week? The show in Iowa for the first responders.
Yeah, that was like a few days ago.
Yeah, a few days ago. Yeah. So how was that? That must have been a bit bizarre. I saw that footage of you with Richie and Orianthi there doing "Living on a Prayer." How was that? Was that kind of weird?
It was weird.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're all professional and we're all adults, so it wasn't that weird. It was kind of like let it be what it's gonna be, Like even they called me and um because it was a last minute addition to the whole thing. So I had already learned all the songs that I had to play. I had to play all night, and then they said, "Hey, so Richie's gonna come and play Living on a Prayer. Is that a problem?" I'm like, "No, man. We're all adults. We can handle anything. And it's rock and roll, and it's for a good cause. So who's gonna back out of that? You know?"
But people are people and they like to read more into it and speculate and start their own
Sure.
stuff. And, yeah.
There's comments like because I wanted to lay out, Richie and Ori were doing the riff and needed the support for the two chords. So it's like I'm going bah, bah, lay out. Bam, 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 and, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So there was one time that I laid out where I saw my friend in the front row, and I look at my friend. When you see a friend in the audience, you joke around, right? So I did that. When I laid out one time, I looked at my fake watch because that's not a watch. I looked at my fake watch. So the comments the next day are like, "Oh my God, Richie totally didn't acknowledge Phil when he walked on stage," and the other one was, "Holy shit, Phil looked at his watch."
So sad. So sad.
It's funny.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's
But
like, come on, man. We're all good. Everything's fine.
yeah. Well, anyways, we'll wrap it up quickly here. So Power and the Kiss are March 28th on Frontiers Music. The previous Phil X and the Drills albums, are there physical copies still available? And if so, where can we get stuff?
Tin Man merchandise.com. Or it's either tinmanmerch.com or I think it's Tin Man Merch. I mean, you can Google that shit now. You can Google anything.
But to get stuff directly and support the artist is crucial. Do you have merch as well, or is it just albums?
I think there's also shirts, but the shirts are from 2019. We haven't got new shirts. The new record, there's a bundle at Frontiers.
There you
So
go.
Google Frontiers, and you go get the new record, and you'll get a T-shirt with it, kind of thing. So that's kind of cool.
Frontiers Music out of Italy, they do a quality job. Phil X, I appreciate your time today. I know you got a busy day. We crammed a bunch in. This was awesome. And
thanks, man.
All the best to you. And we'll start our own rumor mills on who's going to be on the Duets album.
What? I don't know what you're talking about.
This is Phil X on Different Stages Radio.
Thanks, brother. Take care. Have a great day.